Ah yes, the holidays have come again. It's time for all your favorite creators to start cashing in with holiday-related content. And no, I won't be an exception. Now, what Disney thing can I talk about that's Christmas-related? There are so many movies, shows, cartoons, and attractions to pick from. But do you know what Christmas tale Disney keeps coming back to? The Nutcracker. And why not? It's a well-known and classic story, having been adapted into every kind of media. And those adaptations can get really weird.
For there was but one way to break the dreadful spell.
How?
By breaking the hardest nut.
Honestly, a further look into Nutcracker adaptations might be warranted in the future. But for now, let's focus on the Disney ones. There are multiple versions to choose from, but we'll be narrowing it down to 3. Through these, we can get a decent scope for how Disney has adapted the story throughout the years. So, put on your ballet shoes and grab your nearest stall as we examine them together. Our first version comes in the form of a record. Disneyland Records formed in 1955, publishing Disney-related records. Storybooks, soundtracks, all of that. This is a 2-sided record with a storybook attached to it, telling the basic story of the Nutcracker. It's less based on the E.T.A. Hoffmann novel and more on the Tchaikovsky ballet. Hence, the conflict ending early and a big party happening in celebration. Though, the plot of the book isn't really that important, nor is the text. The real draw is the illustrations. The illustrations were done by Suzanne Dolesch. From what I've gathered, she was an artist and illustrator from Budapest. She worked as an artist in the United States, Canada, and Australia. She was talented in many mediums: illustration, painting, stained glass, wrought iron, tapestry, and probably a bunch more. She was an artist for a local newspaper in Arizona, and a lot of her artwork was on public display throughout the state. She even did artwork for the 1967 World's Fair in Canada. On top of that, she illustrated many children's books, including the illustrations for this record. Unfortunately, that's all I've managed to learn about her. I couldn't find a picture of her, or even whether or not she's still alive, which is a shame because her illustrations are what make this book what it is. They're so vibrant and colorful. There's a real childlike whimsy, but not in a crude or childish way, if that makes sense. The way she uses colors and patterns just jump off the page. It makes me wish that this was more than just a storybook. Like, I wish there was a movie or something to go with it. As for the record itself, there isn't much to say. It's selections from the Tchaikovsky ballet. No narrations, no dialogue, it's just the music. This isn't even a new recording of it, it's the ones from Fantasia. And the B-side is the Dance of the Hours, again pulled from Fantasia. You could open Spotify and listen to it right now. So, the record isn't that much to write home about. It's the book and the illustrations that make it worthwhile. If anyone out there happens to know more about Suzanne Dolesch and wants to share that information, please get in contact with me. My Twitter DMs are open. House of Mouse has come up time and time again on this channel, and for good reason. It was a really good show and a treat for any Disney lover. Along with the shenanigans at the club, each episode contained 3 cartoon shorts. These were pulled from a previous Disney cartoon, Mickey Mouse Works. They can be neatly put into different categories based on themes and characters that appear in them. The ones that I thought were the most interesting were the Mouse Tale stories, retellings of popular stories starring Mickey and the gang. This included Around the World in 80 Days, A Midsummer Night's Dream, and, yes, the Nutcracker. This one showed up in both House of Mouse and the Christmas special, Mickey's Magical Christmas. If you've seen this cartoon at all, I'm guessing it's from the latter. The plot of this cartoon is a basic retelling of the Nutcracker. Sort of. It has the basic setup, girl gets a nutcracker and they end up falling in love. But then the Mouse King shows up and wants the girl to be his queen and kidnaps her. That was entirely made up. There's nothing like that in the source material. But, to be fair, the Nutcracker is a weirdly paced story. The climax happens in the first half, the plot stops dead in its track to tell the backstory, there's an extortion subplot with the Mouse King, and the last act is just a victory lap around the kingdom. The ballet is even more like this. Once the first fight with the Mouse King happens, he disappears and we get a bunch of dances. So, yeah, you can see why someone would have to make changes. Especially in a short-form cartoon, when you only have like 10 minutes to tell your story. A lot's gotta go. Aside from that, it's the basic Nutcracker story you know, but with a more comedic, tongue-in-cheek, self-aware tone. You get some meta jokes, characters talking to the narrator, and other stuff like that. Self-referential humor is something that can get annoying really fast, but in a short-form cartoon, it's perfectly utilized.
You broke him!
Right, just for that, I'm kicking you out of the story.
Wow!
Kind of similar to something like Mickey's Christmas Carol, part of the fun is seeing which characters get cast in which roles. Minnie as Maria and Mickey as the Nutcracker is a given. Von Drake as Drosselmeyer fits pretty well. And for the Mouse King, we get Donald. That's just something that's so random that you just can't help but laugh at it. He's even got the mouse ears on, it's pretty funny. Goofy's just kind of there, and he ends up being an ice fairy just to move the plot forward. There isn't a whole lot to say about this cartoon. It's funny and cute. I loved it when I was a kid, and I still love it now. In fact, it makes me wish that this was longer. Like, I want a Mickey's Christmas Carol style cartoon that's just Mickey and his friends going through the Nutcracker. You don't even have to limit it to just the Fab Five. You can include other Disney characters in it too. Again, like what Mickey's Christmas Carol did. In fact, do you know who would make a good Mouse King? Ratigan. You can give him a song, you can do the whole he hates being called a rat thing. It'd be perfect. But as it is, Mickey's Nutcracker is a fun cartoon. But with that, we get on to our third and final version. Nutcracker in the Four Realms. This was Disney's attempt to turn the story into a big fantasy adventure. It doesn't really have much to do with the Nutcracker story, taking the basic premise, some of the characters, a few key plot points, and then just throwing the rest out to make room for new shit. And yet, I think I kind of like it. It's one of the better live-action Disney films in recent memory. It's far from perfect, and we'll get into the problems in a bit, but I can actually get behind a lot of the stuff in this movie. The basic story goes as follows. Clara is experiencing her first Christmas without her mother, who's dead because of course she is. She gets one last present from her, a Fabergé egg without a key. When all of the children get their gifts from Drosselmeyer, she follows a string trail to the matching key. However, she finds that she's wandered into a magical world of 4 realms, one which her mother used to rule. However, the world is in crisis, as the realms are at war with the 4th realm. With a loyal Nutcracker companion at her side, it's up to Clara to put an end to it once and for all. This film reminds me a lot of Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland. The heroine is a lot more active and modern when compared to the source material. It changes the story quite a bit to make it more epic in scale, and it's a huge display of special effects. However, I found 4 Realms to be more engaging because, if nothing else, the world is a lot more pleasant to look at. It's bright and colorful, and there are a lot of creative costumes and sets. This movie is all about the aesthetic and the spectacle, and it's a very pretty one. As you might have guessed, it is kind of all style without much substance. The characters aren't particularly deep, they're perfectly serviceable and likable, but kinda bland. The story is surprisingly decent, even though it doesn't have much to do with the Nutcracker. I actually found myself decently engaged when watching it, and wanted to see where it was going. However, it suffers from some groan-worthy plot points. And I can't talk about that without getting into spoilers, so skip to this timestamp if you don't want to know. I'll give you a couple seconds. Is everyone who didn't want to know gone? Because this movie's got a twist villain. So, there's no Mouse King in this story. The closest we get is a bunch of mice coming together to form a giant mouse, which is one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen in my life. Mother Ginger, a Myra character from the ballet, is set up to be the big bad of the story. However, the Sugar Plum Fairy turns out to be the real tyrant. It is kind of foreshadowed. The backstory ballet does come off as a little propaganda-y, and Ginger doesn't really do much to actually hurt our heroes. But Sugar Plum's transition from bubbly best friend to full-blown fash comes right the fuck out of nowhere. It's a shame because I can see this working. A villain who puts on an amicable and bubbly facade, concealing their true tyrant selves, could be outright terrifying. Maybe if it was set up a little better, have scenes of characters talking about how Sugar Plum's a real witch behind closed doors, contrasting with how she acts around Clara, include hints of it with how she treats others. I don't ever pretend like I know better than the filmmakers or that I could fix things myself, but I think a little more build-up would have made this work a lot more. And maybe if the twist villain hadn't become such a prevalent plot point in recent Disney movies, I might have been able to get past it. Which isn't necessarily this movie's fault, but I'm not gonna say it didn't influence the way I viewed things. In fact, and this is gonna sound like a weird complaint, but hear me out, the movie might have fared better if it was longer. If you want to make a high fantasy epic, make a high fantasy epic. Give it a 2-hour plus runtime and really dedicate more time to develop the world and the characters. Maybe then this film would have been really great. As it is, I think it's just okay. If you're looking for something pretty to watch this holiday season, then check it out. So, those were the Disney Nutcrackers. There are a few other attempts we could talk about, but those were the main 3. Why does Disney keep returning to the Nutcracker well for stories? Well, it's one of those few stories that doesn't have a definitive version. There are a lot of Nutcracker movies, but I wouldn't call any of them particularly great.
No!
So with that niche open, there is room for someone like Disney to make a definitive version, just like they did with Snow White and all the rest. But none of them have really panned out. Don't get me wrong, I liked all of these adaptations. They have a lot of really good elements to them. But they don't stand out as anything particularly amazing. Not on the level of Beauty and the Beast or The Little Mermaid. In a few years, Disney might try to adapt the story again. Who knows what form it might take. Until that day comes, we have these versions to look back on and appreciate for what they are. They might not be definitive, but they each have a charm of their own. So, check them out and decide for yourself. And that concludes the video. Now I'll pass the question on to you. What do you think of the Disney Nutcrackers? Which version is your favorite? What do you want out of a Disney Nutcracker project? Whatever you're thinking, let me know down in the comments. If you'd like to support the show, consider hitting up my Patreon or Ko-fi page. If not, then be sure to like and subscribe to see more of my stuff. Thank you guys for watching. This will probably be my last video of the year, the last video of 2021. I'll be taking the next few weeks off to recharge and get my bearings back for the new year. So, thank you for making this an amazing year, and I hope you'll be sticking around in 2022. But that's all the time I've got for today. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I hope you have a very happy holidays. Take care.